Hi everyone and welcome to the Desteni I Process live Google Hangout. We do Hangouts here from the Desteni I Process channel every Thursday usually, and we also do this special series on relationship success support. We try to do them around the first Thursday or the first Tuesday of every month, but we apologize that we've gotten a little bit off schedule. Below this video, when it's recorded on YouTube, you'll see a playlist of all the previous Hangouts that we've done in this series, and you can always check our schedule for upcoming Hangouts on the Desteni I Process Lite, DIP Lite Facebook page. All of this info will be in the description of the YouTube video after this live recording. As always, we encourage you to participate in this discussion and make it interactive by placing your comments and your questions to the panel today on our Google Plus page. If you're watching directly from YouTube on the live broadcast, you have to click where it says be part of the conversation, and that will take you to our Google Plus page. So today we're continuing with our topic of relationships, and basically we've been talking about the whole process that comes before we even go into a relationship. And in today's Hangout we're talking about dating. In the previous Hangout, we talked about hooking up, and so we thought that it was a natural transition to also talk about the more formal way of meeting people, where you set up dates or you go on dates with people. And this is something that many people might be struggling with in terms of doing it, knowing how to do it. There are a lot of rules and guidelines that has been set up all around the world for how you go about this. So if you do have any question about dating or how to go about it, please ask us a question and we'll give perspectives here in the live Hangout. So let's welcome our guests today. As always, we have our resident relationship expert, Cerise from South Africa. Hi, Cerise.
Hi, Anna.
Hi. And today we have our guest expert here with us from California in the US, and that is Joe. Hey, Joe.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, nice to have you with us. So I'd like to, if we could start by talking a little bit about the various forms of dating that we'll be looking at here. Maybe we could start by making a little list of the types of dating that we found to be relevant or that people use in the world. So Cerise, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Well, different countries have different norms, though these days the Americanized version of dating is becoming quite popular. Aside from the dinner and a movie, there's the internet dating thing is becoming quite big, where people are meeting each other on dating sites and getting to know each other on the internet before they even meet in person. There's speed dating. There's
blind dates.
Then you get casual dating versus formal dating, which is maybe something that's not so prevalent anymore at this time. You know, it's kind of become either just dinner and a movie or hanging out and doing something together. So yeah, we can look at those particular modes.
So how do you have anything to add, Joe? Any forms of dating that we haven't mentioned here?
Well, there's also another dimension that I look at, which is dating is different between social classes. So, for example, if you're, working at let's say a job, you make an okay amount of money, you're single, you're probably going to be meeting other people in the same bracket, and your dates are probably going to be, the bowling alley or dinner and a movie or going to a concert, things like that kind of have a little bit of that entertainment value, and it's full enough so that you can still get to know each other. But if you look at maybe a higher class, I don't like to say higher, but the more wealthier class of people, their dates are more like a business arrangement. You go to a high-class restaurant. You stay at some kind of getaway. You go to places where that is your norm. That is your social culture. And your dating is completely different. And then we have the people on the bottom of the spectrum. Dating is actually, I find, more natural because there's less pressure to present yourself, and there's a bit more freedom to be who you are. Of course, you want to meet someone good and possibly, find a partner that can help you get out of a bad situation. When at the lower end of the spectrum, your social values, your social class isn't what takes prominence. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and like we were talking about, I think it's also a cultural issue because, for example, maybe in a country like India, it would be very normal to be set up, for example, by your parents. And then maybe a date would even be in your parents' house, with them being present, and it would all be very formal. But the way that I grew up in Scandinavia, where it's like very free and there's not really any issues about sex either, the normal way would actually be to go to a party and then you hook up with someone and then you have sex with them and then you might see if it leads to something more. You'd be like, okay, now we hooked up, I liked it, you like me, you want to go bowling next week. So that's kind of interesting that it's kind of the other way around, that you usually start by actually having sex or at least making out before you would then take it to the next level.
Yes, definitely.
Go ahead.
No, well, there are so many dimensions to consider when it comes to dating. One other thing we get: why date? Why dating? And depending on who you are, depending on the culture, the times you live in, the people in your life, and even your education and the kind of society that you live in, the answer to that would be different. For some, dating would be the first step to getting a potential life partner. For others, dating is kind of like a sport. And there are so many things that can be brought into dating. I think the core question is, who are you within the dating?
That's interesting. Or maybe you actually just want to have sex, but then you have to go through this process to actually get to that point. But let's talk a little bit. Sorry, go ahead, Joe.
No, there was a little bit of lag. I'm just saying right to what you just.
Okay, so let's go into these rules, because I know that, and I think that a lot of people are probably struggling with this aspect of dating, especially if it's not something that they had any like training or experience with. Can you share a little bit about all the rules and guidelines, and maybe also the myths that are surrounding this whole topic of dating or the dating game?
Okay, well, I suppose it will depend on your culture, but generally, the rules around dating it's kind of weird because you are essentially putting on a face and meeting someone else who's also putting on a face. Neither of you are really showing who you are, and you're kind of doing this dance to. I wouldn't say that the goal is to find out who the other person is, because it's not really kind of what you have in mind when you're doing the dance with them. It's more, let's maybe say it's more of a kind of a selfish focus, where it's a constant assessment of whether the person is responding to you in the way that you want them to. So you'll say something and be wondering, okay, should I have said that? Should I not have said that? Should I have said it differently? And let's say, your goals and your focus, aside from being completely smitten with a person, in most cases, is to determine whether they feel the same way. And strangely enough, we don't usually think about how we can really develop a relationship and how we can really develop communication with a person. It's more about playing this emotional game and seeing if you're still on the same page together, but doing it in this roundabout way where you're not really sure what you're really dealing with, because you're constantly wondering what's going on in the other person because you're not developing communication. So the whole dating game is it's essentially based on illusions and whether you are, maybe, shall we say, believing each other's illusion, and whether your illusion that you're creating is something that the person that you're dating, if it's something that they'll like. So that's a kind of a one way of looking at it. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I was actually, when you said that, I was thinking about how, I don't know if this might be mostly for women, but this point of, for example, putting on specific makeup and specific clothes that makes you look different than you are, or it could be lying about your occupation. And then there is this idea that you just have to get the person interested or smitten enough that when you then reveal the big lie, or when you then show them how you actually look, or how your apartment or whatever looks like, they will be hooked. And that fits into what you were saying, that it's like it's all about illusions. It's not really about a real relationship. And that's quite, and I think it's quite exhausting as well, especially for people that are, desperate and they really want it and they take it very seriously and go on a lot of dates. That it's tough. It's like going on a job interview, basically. So what would you say, Joe?
Yeah, all of this is quite relevant, because what I was reminded of in this discourse was the stories I've heard of, people that would start dating and they like her, and whenever they're together, they'll do this thing where they will not fart in front of each other.
Yeah.
That's like considered like, no, they cannot see me do that. They cannot know how bodily functions. That would ruin everything.
Yeah.
And I mean, while I understand where that comes from, one also has to really investigate or not. That's something we want to keep going, because what is the point of dating? And like we mentioned, it's really about all these layers set up in front of ourselves, all these versions of ourselves that we want to be seen as and accepted as, that we don't accept ourselves as, but we want someone else at. So we present ourselves, and we hope that they buy that picture. And it's just like you said, Anna. It's like all of this is upselling who we are, so that accept who we actually are, in the hopes that they'll see something in us and accept that we didn't accept to begin with. So dating is like a maze. It's this maze game that we play. We put this maze out so that they kind of have to work through all these layers to find us, and if they make it through that far, then maybe they're the one.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because on the other end of all that show and display, there's like a genuine wish to find someone that would accept you for who you really are, and to find someone that you can be yourself with, that you can be relaxed with, that you can communicate with, and that whole idea of growing old together. But growing old together means you'll probably fart and you'll probably lose your teeth, and so it's like, why would you then present something different now if that is really in the end what you would want? So that's quite interesting, that it's like we have to have them accept the illusion to be able to accept the real me. That's fascinating.
It is a very odd thing that we've created.
So what other struggles have you seen or have you experienced in relation to dating that might be like a barrier that people experience when it comes to approaching the point of dating?
Sorry, did you say what struggles?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, shall we go a little bit into the people who struggle with creating that illusion of themselves, and who
Yes.
might, yeah, who might struggle with putting on that picture. Um, Funnily enough, the people in the world who are most honest are usually the ones who are the most shunned by other people. So, they find themselves in this position where they want to develop relationships and they want to meet people and connect with people, and they're showing who they are, but they're getting rejected for it because they're not playing the game. So um, there's a specific word that said that these people are lacking. It's like a slyness or anyway. So let's say you're lacking in this particular ability to deceive others and show your pretty feathers. What do you do in this world that is so based on illusions and fantasies and putting up very particular images? I think that in part it is something that is, in some circles at least, becoming less common because people are getting pretty damn tired of playing the game, at least in some circles, like I said. So one approach would be to deliberately start putting yourself in places where you're going to be more likely to find someone who's not really interested in the game, someone who is more likely to be honest. So, for example, you're not going to meet someone in a club who's going to be on the same page as you if you're not willing to be playing the game. So don't go to places like clubs if you want to find someone and develop a relationship with them that's starting off relatively honest. There are different ways of meeting people, and it's not easy. Of course, it's not easy. There's very little in this world that is easy. But if you start looking to create the life that you'd like to create, you need to start putting yourself out there and start testing to see what does work and what does not work, and what you are able to create and what you're not able to create. And that means putting yourself in new positions and new situations to meet new people who are likely to be the kind of people that you would like to meet. So that's one approach that someone can take when the dating game is something that really doesn't make any sense to you.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that in the previous hangout, that like a very practical suggestion that I would give is to like, let's say you like being in nature and you like taking walks in nature. You find like a local group of people that also likes walking in nature, and a really cool way, because for example, one place that people meet potential partners without being like a formal date would be coworkers, right? Because them you see every day, and you naturally start building a relationship and get to know each other without there being that pressure. And so it's also easier to assess whether you're compatible or not. So, for example, doing like a cooking class, doing something where you're actually doing a activity together, because that takes off the pressure of like having to present yourself, but then having it to be like a regular event where you, for example, go for 8 weeks or 6 weeks or a year course doing cooking or ceramics or whatever that you're interested in, where you might also meet someone that's interested in the same or something similar as you, which is also like a very grounded way of meeting someone. Yeah, how about you, Joe? What would you say in relation to these struggles that people might face with dating?
Oh, the tales I can tell. And I say that because dating was really interesting before and after Desteni. Because before I started to get more aware of myself, my starting point within relationships was really about wanting someone else to accept me for all the things I didn't accept, and me wanting to look somewhere else to make me happy, wanting to find my potential partner. Or sometimes it really was just I felt lonely and I didn't have a point of self-intimacy, so I wanted sex. I wanted, any excuse to have a sexual encounter, and in order to do that, in our society, you kind of have to meet somebody. So those were my starting points before I got to investigate myself. And dating was actually in a way easier then because you just kind of go along with your feelings. Oh, I think she's cute. I'm going to try her. And you would go on these dates and you would try to get these relationships, and they would always fall flat because the starting point was never really about something. And then after Destiny, fascinatingly enough, my experience was that dating became a bit harder because I had to remember that, yes, I have been walking this process to get to know myself and understand where these feelings are coming from and why I'm drawn to certain things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that other people that I will meet will have gone through that. And oftentimes, the people that I have met or gone on dates with is still that point of I need to be even more humble with myself, more honest with myself, because I had this tendency to become critical about other people. Like, what do you mean you get mad at this? Why would you be mad at that? Don't you understand those feelings aren't real? And I would I would have to slow down and realize, wait a minute, I have to be the example of my process. And yeah, I did walk through all of that, but that took me years. And as I'm meeting people now, it's about creating that opportunity for another if they should decide to walk through it. But ultimately, it's who I am that matters within the meeting. So there have been dates where, I would notice myself get so judgmental about who they were and what they were not doing and who within themselves. And it was a really humbling experience because it showed me, firstly, how much I've changed for myself to be able to, but also to be aware that I'm still judging other people. And that was something that was hard for me at first to walk through. But now I've gotten to a point where I'm starting to allow myself to enjoy the process of meeting somebody and getting to know them for who they are, and comfortable. In a way, it's like playing the game, but it's not like before where I'm trying to project something that I'm not. It's more like I'm comfortable to the degree that person might be comfortable with me, so I don't go into oversharing or trying to, throw my process down their throats. It's more of a sharing, and I think that has changed for me in terms of my dating life so far.
I really liked what you said because I think that that's actually a common issue that people have, not just with you being a Destonian and the process that you walked, but I think that there is an expectation of having an immediate connection. You're going to meet them and then you're going to know, and then it's either going to be or it's not going to be, like very absolute. Oh, this person is not for me, let me keep looking. And what I would say is that I think that we're often too much in a hurry, where we know ourselves. We know that inside of us there's like an entire universe of various dimensions and aspects. Like you were saying, for example, I still have these judgments, but that doesn't define all of you. Just like if you're on a date with someone and they get nervous, for example, that doesn't define all of them. And then if you haven't taken the chance or the opportunity to actually get to know them, but you're expecting that they have to be perfect and there has to be like an immediate natural connection, and if that's not there, then that's a sign that this person is not for me, when in fact an actual real connection often takes time to create more, meetings of communicating, and also like the dating game that you see in movies is like very, you have these like specific amount of dates, no sex on the first date and calling after the third date, and then, oh, now we've been to 12 dates and nothing is happening, oh my God. So I would also say, a suggestion would be just take a step back from all of that. And like you were saying, Joe, it was really cool, like to really just enjoy getting to know the person. And then another point that also came up from what you said that I've seen a lot is that, like, there are two different ways of approaching this point, where one would be like the superiority way, which is where you go into judgment, for example, where there's also a lot of fear behind it, and then the other one would be inferiority. So when you're in inferiority, you're like, oh my God, what do they think about me? Do they like me? All of that. How's my hair? And when you're in the superiority, you're like, how can this person satisfy my needs? Do they fit my social place, social hierarchy? But very seldom do we consider the point of, like, we just think about who would be good for me. What do I need? Like, I want someone to comfort me. I want someone to talk to. But we don't really ask ourselves, am I someone that someone would want to talk with? Am I someone who would sit there and listen? Like, we don't spend a lot of time on actually preparing ourselves to be a supportive mate, to be the kind of partner that we would want. And so I think a lot of these relationships, potential relationships, they also fall through because we haven't actually worked on ourselves. We haven't actually worked on, we just want someone to fulfill something within us or make up for something within us or give us something, but we don't consider what we're actually bringing into it and what we can contribute with, and then standing by that and saying, this is what I have to give, and showing them this is what I have to offer. So what would you say in relation to that, Cerise?
You're looking at the point of comparing how dating is now versus how it could be. Now, how it is now is basically a game, it's a dance, it's an illusion. And how it could be is a combination of sharing and creating. So you're sharing of yourself with your partner and you're creating your life together. One of the most difficult points in a relationship is communication, and one of the most underdeveloped skills in people in this day is also communication. So there is a very serious problem there that tends to be one of the most common problems, not only in relationships of a, shall we say, an intimate nature, but also familial relationships, friendships, work relationships. People don't know how to communicate clearly with each other. The problem usually comes from the source that everyone is interpreting everyone else without really understanding what that person is saying, without really knowing what vocabulary that person is using. And that brings me to the point of everyone's vocabulary is different. I mean, if I say the word love, it means different things to every person. So how can we develop relationships when we don't even realize that something as simple as having a common vocabulary can be such a great tool in developing the relationship? Relationships not only about meeting someone who's a good match, it's about knowing how to share yourself and knowing how to accept their sharing and knowing how to work together to create something together. Yeah, this point of communication is a very, very big part of the dysfunctional nature of relationships in this day and age.
Absolutely, very well said. Joe, do you want to add something to that?
I mean, that was very well put. And just to add to that point, when I look at some of the experiences I've had within relationships, all of the issues, the dramas, the conflict bubble up and turn into those breaking points, all of those could have been avoided if we had a clear vocabulary, if we had a clear understanding. And the reason for this is just like how Cerise mentioned, even in the word love, you have completely different understandings, different experiences attached to that word. You're saying that word and living that word as though you're on the same page, and that's a deadly assumption. And that's true for every word in your vocabulary, because the vocabulary is how you define words. It's also how you live those words, what those words are within you, and your relationship to that, if it's not equal with your partner, actually create separate worlds that seem to be in alignment. And when those things bubble up, oftentimes we don't look at, okay, what are you really angry at? I noticed that we're at this impasse here, and it's a communication problem. Help me to understand how you've defined the situation. How are you experiencing? Let's see if we can actually understand before we make a judgment about who's right or wrong. That, I think, is one of the most critical things missing, not just in relationships, but in all relationships. And I would include the relationship we have with ourselves. I mean, we have to start there, don't we? We have to start understanding the words that we ourselves use and how we define those words. And the more we master that, the more we can share that with a partner and make sure we are on the same page, using the same words, living the same definitions. And that, I think, should be mandatory learning for all human beings. I think that thing could contribute to so much more healthier relationships than what we have now.
Yeah, absolutely. This reminds me of a study that I read once where they had investigated what you could say matching factors, like in terms of, like, for example, people earning the same amount of money or having the same social status. Like what matching factors were involved with people staying together the longest. And what they found was that the single most important factor was sharing values. People that have the same values and that agree on the values that they have, it could be religious, for example, they tend to be more in alignment. So that's quite an interesting point, and that brings me to another point that I've seen, which is that when we go on these dates, whether it is casual or more formal, we tend to just talk about, you know, again, that whole presentation where we're like, well, I work with this and I do this and then I like karate in my free time, but we kind of forget to talk about what it is that we want out of the future. And I can come up with an example from my own relationship, and that I know that other people have faced as well, where we didn't talk about having children. And we were 2 years into our relationship until that point came up. And that can become a deal breaker if the one person, and this would of course often be the woman that wants children and the man that has maybe even decided that this is not something that he wants for himself and it's just an absolute decision. And then you arrive at that and you're already maybe moved in together and set everything up, or it could be other things as well, you know, in terms of what is it that I want to do with my life, but it could even be speaking about the past. And, for example, emotional baggage that you have with you. But I mean, I suppose the problem there is also that we're often not even, you know, we're even keeping that away from ourselves when it comes to in terms of the past. But I would say that that would be a very important thing to actually, when you assess compatibility, would be to take a process or a moment to discuss all of these things. Like, where did I come from? Where am I at now? Where is it that I see myself going? Can we find some common ground here? Because that, you know, might be missed and can create a lot of conflict later on. But I want to ask you guys here before we finish. So if someone is sitting out there watching and they are not currently dating, or they have been dating, but they're finding it very difficult, and they have a lot of like anxiety or like Joe, like judgments coming up. What practical suggestions do you have for someone to approach dating in a way similar to the process that you walked, Joe, where eventually it can be a point of enjoying meeting people and being more relaxed, but also more effective in terms of communication and assessing compatibility?
Well, like we've said before, you need to place yourself in situations where you're more likely to meet someone who is the kind of person that you want to meet. And over and above that, what I've found is that first developing a clear communication before even considering dating can be quite beneficial, although the sexual tension usually does become a problem, and very often people will then kind of start the sexual relationship before they've really created a solid foundation within their communication. But what I've seen is that in creating a clear communication first, where both of you are very comfortably and openly discussing yourselves and sharing yourselves without having the pressure of the relationship hanging over you, it's easier to be able to assess whether you will be, shall we say, compatible in the long term, because very often what relationships do is that they kind of make your vision a little bit cloudy, because there's all of these feelings and emotions coming up inside of you, whether you are walking a process like with Destiny or not. Chances are dating is something that brings up quite a lot of energetic experiences, and those experiences can be quite influential on your ability to assess yourself and another person clearly. And very often people lost in that energetic experience and only realize 6 months down the line, oh dear, I've been spending 6 months in a kind of an alternate reality, and I haven't actually been developing the relationship, and I haven't actually been developing communication. I've just been lost in the fantasy of the lovey-dovey little world that I've been in. So,
and the worst case scenario there, which I suppose happens quite a lot, is that the woman becomes pregnant, and then you're stuck.
Yeah.
Or not necessarily a worst case scenario, but it is a possibility. I mean, you could even have that, like, even if what we're saying doesn't make sense, you can have that as like a point, because every time you have sex with someone, despite of all the prevention, that risk is there. So, you know, are you willing to make that commitment? But that's completely.
Anna, can you just say that last part again? You broke up.
No, I was just saying that is a real, like, that's a real possibility, because you were saying, you know, six months down the line, you realize that the magic was an illusion. But in a sort of worst case scenario, you could have already gotten pregnant or created like financial ties with each other. You know, if you just move on it and let's move in together or let's get married, and then it can create a lot of consequences in your life.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that so many people place the focus on the point of sexual chemistry, when sexual chemistry is usually pretty much just chemistry. And energetic experiences. And when you're looking at a long-term relationship, the important thing is not going to be sexual chemistry as much as it is going to be a clear communication. Because what you'll find is that you can have a clear communication. From that communication, develop sexual intimacy and develop that sexual connection. But if you only have the sexual connection and you ignore the communication part, that's usually when you end up with relationships where there's a lot of conflict, a lot of arguments, a lot of breaking up and making up, and that sexual draw is interpreted as love, but it's not really love, because your relationship is based on a physical and emotional connection rather than a connection of, okay, what are we creating together? What's going to be the best for you? What's going to be the best for me? What's going to be the best for this whole world that we're in? So that is part of the human tendency to get lost in our experiences rather than taking a step back and looking at, okay, what am I actually creating and what am I actually participating in here, and what is important, because an energetic experience or a sexual connection is not necessarily going to be something that is going to last a lifetime. Chances are it's going to last 6 months to a year, and then it fizzles away, and then you're left with sitting there with a person that you don't really know, a person that you can't really communicate with because you're completely on different planes in terms of your vocabulary and your definitions and your understandings. You know, that's basically generally the end of the relationship.
That's a very good point. We have a question here before we go to you, Joe. And, well, I mean, this is actually a cool question that we can give to you. So he's saying it is from Andres Felipe, and he's saying, what would you say to people who look for dating just because they fear being alone?
Yeah, that is one of the questions that one really has to spend some time for themselves on. Oftentimes I found in my life, when I most wanted to go out people and, you know, find a potential relationship or just go dating, there was an energetic drive behind it, and that drive often came from either wanting to distract myself so that I didn't have to be alone and face myself because of things that were going on within me, or it was a point of I wasn't accepting myself, or I felt some kind of lack that I didn't allow myself to give myself, or for some reason I felt I didn't deserve. So I would go chasing it outside in the world, and there's a really fine line, and the more one works at it, the more one notices what the difference is between being open to meeting people, because that's an opportunity for you to actually meet yourself and other dimensions of yourself. The difference of going out there trying to find something to fulfill you or trying to find something to distract you. For me, the key difference in pointing that is, am I the one sitting down and making that decision and being comfortable with it? Or am I kind of just like, okay, God, I'm so bored. What am I going to do? Oh, okay, let's go dating. Oh, let's go on dating sites. Oh, hey, personal ads. There is that difference. So to say that, you know, how does one work with that? It's getting to know who you are in those two modes. What's driving you? And who are you within that decision to date?
Yeah, I'd like to bring up another dimension with this point as well, which is the idea of the progression of life. So a lot of us are being controlled or guided by this idea of how life is supposed to progress. So by this age, this life event should have happened. By this age, that life event should have happened, like getting married, having a career, getting children. And then there is this taboo and this fear that if I, for example, if I have not had sex at the age of 25, it means that there's something wrong with me, and maybe I will end up completely isolated and alone for the rest of my life. Or if I had not had children by the age of 30, huge problem, right? So we have this idea of how life is supposed to progress, and what is really interesting is that this is actually indicating that we're believing the illusion to be real. So we are presented, for example, by the media. Like I've talked to people who are single, for example, people who in their late 20s had never had a relationship. And this was just like a particular person who had built up such an illusion in their mind about what other people have. You know, this idea that everyone has this and I'm the only one, and that must mean that there's something wrong with me. And so through that, you can actually create an experience of loneliness, of feeling like a failure, of being afraid of being alone, where you weren't actually. You were actually fine, but because you started thinking about this, where am I supposed to be, and you started comparing yourself to where you think everyone else are, which you have to start like looking at where is it coming from, because a lot of it is coming like subliminally or subconsciously from advertisements of seeing people holding hands or mothers with strollers or whatever, that is impulsing you to, that is what contributes to the illusion that everyone else is doing it. So that is something that I would suggest, like if those like fears and desperation, and especially this like, what if I will be alone for the rest of my life, like if these thoughts comes up, to sit down and write it out for yourself. For example, write about it, because that helps to clear the fog, so to speak. Like observe yourself, analyze, get to understand where these thoughts are coming from. And then actually do, instead of like then trying to fulfill that, like you're saying, Joe, like, oh, I gotta start dating, where you're actually trying to soothe the fear, go in the complete opposite direction of saying, okay, let's put the brakes on. I am going to focus on developing my relationship with myself. And I'm not even like, it's not here right now. The opportunity is not here. Like right now, I cannot, you can't do anything with that fear of, are you going to end up alone for the rest of your life? So really something that I found very supportive is to, in those moments, you work with the worst case scenario. So say that, okay, what if I were actually to end up alone for the rest of my life? How am I going to then live with myself? Because the one person you can never get away from is yourself. So if that is true, then you at least have to be able to live with yourself and be okay with that. So why not work on that? Because then if you meet someone, it won't be out of desperation or fear, but it would be, hey, I enjoy being with you. But if I'm not, I'm also okay, because I'm with me and I am doing things with my life that I enjoy doing. So that would be my perspective. Anything else to add here, Cerise?
No, I think you guys pretty much covered it.
Okay, so anything else to add in general to this topic of dating that you see would be beneficial to share?
Maybe one point that we haven't really touched on is the progression of dating, so much as in terms of when do you decide when to take the next step in your relationship. Like if it's a new relationship, when do you decide to move to sex, if you haven't already? And when do you decide to take it to the next step, meeting your parents? In part, you're looking at two dimensions. The first being that it's like that point that you described, Anna, where there are certain milestones in your life that you feel that you should reach by certain ages. So you put a kind of a time frame on your relationship. By so many weeks you should be doing this, and by so many months you should be doing that. And if this is not happening, then the relationship's probably not working out, and you should end it and find something new. The other dimension is that it only happens that way because we're not really taught how to create our lives and how to develop relationships. We're kind of like chucked in the deep end, and we're trying to figure it out on our own, and all that we have to really learn from is what we see on TV and what we see our friends doing, and it ends up being stuff that's generally not very supportive, and stuff that generally leads to the end of a relationship. So I suppose the real question is, should there be any milestones at all? I don't think so. It should be a natural progression, and a progression that's based on an open communication and an active and deliberate choice between both partners. Is this the next step that we're going to take? And if so, we're taking it together and we're doing it side by side, and we're going to support each other through it, and we're going to figure it out, and we're going to make sure that we're doing it in a way that will be enjoyable for both of us and supportive for both of us. You know, that verse that's compared to the kind of emotional choices that people usually make, where it's like, oh, it's about this time, we should be doing that, let's do it, yay!
Yeah. Yeah, like, oh, now we should have children. Oh, now we should get married. And I'd like to add just one more point before we go to you, Joe, for the final last word of the hangout. But about this thing I was saying with the progression, like this illusion of the progression of life, just to show, you know, if that is something that you're experiencing, because I know that I did, to have a look at, you know, in terms of like unveiling that as a delusion is, okay, so let's say you're doing all these things in the right time. So what is it that you do? You know, it's easy to figure out. It's very predictable. You find a partner, you get married, you have children, you have a good career, then you get old, then you have grandchildren, and then you die. And that's it. And that is how we measure quality of life. That is how we measure, in very broad terms, a successful, well-lived life. This is the elements that has to contain. But where in that does it say anything about your growth or development as a being or as a person? I suppose that is then supposed to be contained in the career aspect, right? But it's not really. So where is the aspect that is living every day and developing yourself? It's not there. Like it's not even something that you're really doing for yourself. It's more like keeping up with this race. So that's something that I found very supportive, to stop that whole like belief and that illusion and take a step back. Now I'll hand it over to Joe for the last word for this hangout.
Well, thank you. Just to touch up on this point, you know, those milestones that we seem to have expectations of. For example, by the time I'm, you know, in my 20s, I should have a good grasp on my education. When I'm 30, I should be in my career. By 35, I should have my family going and build a nest egg and get ready for my future. By the time I'm 40 and 50, I should look at retirement options. But we don't stop and think, why do we even have these expectations? Let's really slow down and look at this. Long ago, it made sense for people to get married, get together, and have children when, you know, they're very, very young, because life expectancy was very low back then, and that was survival of continuing life. And as time progressed, as things changed, as things evolved, we started to live longer. We have children later. Some things haven't really changed, which is, you know, the need to have a career, the need to have this family unit, the need to have all of this, you know, A plus B plus C equals your, and this is how you make a living in the world. But that's only because this world does not unconditionally support people. That's because this world does not exist where you are okay. You are a living being. There is no need, no rush for you to have to get married, have to, you know, start a family by a certain time bracket, because you need that time to work for the rest of your life. And, you know, this world functions in a way where, yeah, it's advantageous for you to have a partner expenses with. But is that a reason for you to create a relationship? It shouldn't be. It is in reality, but it shouldn't be. So let's remember that and keep that in our, that this isn't to define who we are. I walked through this for myself. I'm 32 years old. And the past years, the thoughts kept, you know, God, what did I do with my life? I don't have a wife. I don't have kids. I don't have a master's degree in anything. I don't have a career. My face isn't up on afford. Oh my God, it's too late. I'm 32. But all of that is the illusion. All of that is a product of a world that doesn't see you as inherently valuable, life as a living being. And isn't that who we are? Isn't that what we want to hold on to? And that's what I would leave you with.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Very, very well said. So if you guys have been watching, if you like what you saw, please vote for this or thumbs up this video and subscribe to us on YouTube and keep up to date with the upcoming events. We will do our best to be back in about a month's time, but as always, you can check the DIP Lite schedule on Facebook. Cerise, do we have a topic for next month?
Well, I think that it's about time that we delve into actual relationship issues. Yeah, we'll look at what kind of relationship issue we can tackle in our first real relationship hangout.
Yeah, I know we've been getting requests to do the topic of long distance relationships.
Okay, cool.
So we'll do that at some point at least. All right, so that is very exciting. So next, stay tuned for the next hangout where we will delve into the deep end of when the relationship is actually started and you're there and what do you do now? Scary situation. So thank you so much, Jo and Cerise. And on Thursday, we are continuing with our series on practical self-empowerment. I am not very good at different time zones, but I think it's at 7 GMT time. Please check out the schedule on the DIP Lite website, or sorry, the Facebook page, to be sure to tune in. And then we have a movie hangout on Friday, and I do not remember what that is about either. So a lot of surprises coming up. Stay tuned, and we will be back. Bye, guys.
Bye.